Good morning. My name is Janelle McLaughlin. I'm chair of ETAC. It is 7:35 and we're starting our meeting October 11th. I'd like to remind everyone that you do have microphones that are taking our notes, and at the time of speaking, please press down the button, and when you finish, please remove the button. So just getting the right agenda here. So I'd like to call to order the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Carl is going to do the Pledge of Allegiance for us.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to do roll call. We have an excused absence for Ward 5, ISIS, and Carl.
Here.
Dan.
Here.
Desi.
Here.
Tom.
Here.
Gillard. Hi.
Here.
And Gary.
Here.
Thank you very much. And we have William.
Good morning.
Good morning. And we have Lori.
John from the City Attorney's Office. Good morning, everyone.
Very good.
Corey Wilkerson from Public Works.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have the minutes for approval, and yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
Don't we need to excuse the absence?
Oh, I'm so sorry. We have an excused absence. May I ask for approval to excuse the absence?
I make a motion to excuse the absence.
I second it.
It's
All in
actually
favor?
one motion for items A, B, and C, which are the consent calendar. So
it was later on the. I apologize. Usually it goes the other way around.
Thank you.
which motion was that for item A, B, and C?
I take my motion off the table.
I'd like to hear a motion for item A, B, and C. If everything is approved,
I would like to review the minutes because we have folks that were not here for the minutes. Did everyone get a chance, or would you like to take a moment to read them? Thank you for getting them to us last evening. Any questions regarding the minutes? Okay, so then I'm asking for the A, B, and C. May I have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve A, B, and C.
Second motion.
Motion passes.
You have to vote.
Oh,
You know, I haven't had a chance to read the minutes.
let's take,
Was this last night?
yeah. That's why I said let's take a moment. Does anybody need to review the minutes? So let's remove.
So are we approving these draft bylaws?
My understanding, we're reviewing the minutes that say September 6th, public comments, and then request for supplemental funding minutes.
There were no bylaws in there.
Yeah, we did go.
So I do have a question here is on number E on page 3 when it says member Wood inquired about the types of trees, and it was noted the revisions to the tree species will be part of the master plan. Not understanding what a master plan is or when it's due or what that means.
We have a plan that covers the entire city as to some recommended species for different streets and roadways throughout the city. So if the species are going to be changed, I think it's appropriate that be done as part of the master plan. Perhaps we can revise the tree master plan that covers the entire city. And so we can start looking at the entire city, or we can maybe divide the city into different sectors, and then we can designate changes to the tree species. This one? Yeah. And then we can designate changes to the tree species, and that would be that would appear to be appropriate, unless Pedro and or Danelle have a different approach.
So I think the question on regarding the species was to take the existing species designated species book that we have, set it up so that it shows the drought tolerance levels of the trees that are existing in our species book. And we had talked about doing a very simple Excel sheet or something like that to understand the drought, capabilities of this. It was not a request to do a total master plan, but it was a request that it was mentioned that, let's say, the planning department or other areas did not have a succinct idea of what was drought tolerant, although it was within the copy of the species designated species book, but it was very hard manual to use and operate for folks that did not have an understanding of trees, such as if you're breaking it out on an Excel, that it would say, as a young tree, this tree is not a good drought tolerant tree, but as it gets older, it is. Or this tree is a low root tree, so that it would be an easy tool that could be used. So I think that's what we were discussing, not a whole big new master plan that took a whole lot of time, but just a quick recap that is a easier, more usable tool. I think you had even mentioned that, William, that it was a difficult tool to use in the format it was in now. Am I correct when you said it was difficult?
Yes, and I think that pretty much everything you've said is correct. And what I had in mind was to not make the review of the master plan so complex, to really bring something simple back. But nonetheless, I still believe that would be a master plan. And so I think that's the suggestion that you've provided is good. I think that we can bring something back. I would have to check in with Danelle and or Pedro to see when we could review something like that for ETAC's review and approval. Can you provide us with any ideas, Pedro?
Well, as Chairperson McLaughlin mentioned, we do have a designated species book. That is for public trees. There's also recommended species for development, which is handled by the planning division for on-site planting. So I think my understanding is that they want to interface the two, so we have drought tolerant or appropriate trees on-site. Excuse me, not in terms of the discussion on the right of way. That's my understanding. So we can try to bridge those two. That was my understanding.
So I just asking a clarification here is that when we spoke about the developer plans in the planning department, we had, let's say specifically the sycamores, and at that time you said that the planning department did not have the species book that would show them that it was drought tolerant or not.
I do not know. I'm not.
Okay.
We don't know.
Let's move that then and have that for further discussion.
Maybe we could bring that item back at a different time.
Correct.
There's a whole
Not in the
lot-
minutes.
there's a whole lot of-
Correct. So I was making a little extra time for everybody to read the minutes. Have we all read the minutes? Are we ready to approve the A, B, and C?
I'll vote aye on that vote.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. And
It's so moved. I have to take a vote.
I'll second. Okay.
And a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain.
That's right.
Okay. Yes, I did aye. I called for the vote. So we're on number D, the request for supplementing funding that was presented to us in the last meeting. And I believe, if I calculate it correct, the total of that is 1.225 in its entirety. Is that correct? Do any of my committee members need to review that or have any questions that they'd like to bring forward to this? Please note to the microphone people, we have a lot of pieces of paper in front of us that we're sorting. Good reports. So where I got the 1.22 is we took the 700 trees at 885, and then we went in here and took the 65,000 for outreach, and then taking the number of C, which is the 275, which totals is the 1225. That's how I got that number. And that was the presentation. So, does anybody like to make a motion that we accept these numbers to move to City Council for a request of these funds?
I so move that we do that. That we go ask for the full amount of 1.2 million.
1225.
1225. Do I have a second?
I'd like to get a little bit of clarification. 1,225,000 would cover these three phases.
I'd like to go through it then on the planting of the 700 trees. As I see, removing 286 is 75,000, removing 84 stumps is 10,000. The plant of 700 trees is 210,000. Watering of the new trees for 1 to 3 years is 500,000, and a two-term cycle of trim on the first through the 6th year is 90,000, totaling 885,000. And that was presented on September 6th on the recommended action. Then that was number one. Number two was outreach and education materials. Door hangers, 20,000. Production costs, 30,000. Produce city council video and neighborhood meetings, 5,000. Schedule neighborhood association meetings for training and tree care and save water and staff and personnel was estimated at 30,000, totaling a 65,000. That's where I got the second figure of the 65,000. On number 3, which is the median trees watering option, we were given option A, which was watering of young trees manually for a $96,000 annual fee. Our water injection, which was number B, at $264,000, with a total of $360,000, which is a combination of A and B. Or given to us in this report was a supplement that if we chose C, which was tree watering sprinkle system, which would be retrofitting the current system, cap all sprinklers except for the 3 closest to the trees, was a $275,000 one-time cost and would not be a reoccurring cost, such as the $360,000 of the reoccurring cost. And so is that 1.225 and we need to add 95 to that? Or is that just straight the 275, William?
Yes, that's 275. And so the follow-up question would be, is there an order of priority? Obviously, if we were given the $1,225,000, we'd be in great shape. We'd be able to do everything. But if the city manager's office cuts the funding in half or only provides a certain percentage of that, If there can be discussion and direction by ETAC as to an order of priority based on the funding that's provided, in case it's less than the entire amount.
Would you advise to do that at this time? Because this is in the entirety of what we requested. You know, I go back to door hangers, 20,000 production cost. Okay, so you know, you've researched all of this, so we'd like to just go with the 1,225,000 as it is, and if there is an adjustment of funds, then we come back and review it and have a subcommittee meeting or a full ETAC meeting at this time. But we'd like to proceed with the 1,225.
Okay.
So
Yes.
I have one comment, which is that when we discussed this at the special meeting, this item C was discussed as a potential cost-saving measure, and we were going to get a report back about what this saves annually. This one-time retrofit saves the city annually based on the current costs. So not additional supplemental costs, but what it would save us on current costs of going around and watering median trees.
I can answer that one. I'll try to speak loudly so the microphone can hear. Basically, it saves us our staff time. You know, we talked about that. It's basically that 210,000 that you see there in item. Let me just give you the right number. B and A and B, where it says 210,000 annually. That's what we're, you know, in labor with our staff. That's what we're currently. It's costing us to do it now, and the way we're doing it now. So that's what we would be saving. Does that answer it?
So is it fair to assume that the 210,000 would no longer be a cost, or is there some margin of additional staff time required even with this retrofit?
With the retrofit, there will be no staff for the watering of the
For
medians.
this
We will be
piece.
able to use them in the regular operations of our tree program, as they were doing prior to the water being shut off to the medians.
So I would ask that when we make the request to City Council, that we only add $65,000 to the request for item 3, median tree watering, and talk about the $210,000 cost saving that we would realize with that one-time retrofit.
So I would like to make a request that we bring back the formal request to the City Council and in the format before it proceeds to City Council for review. So that is, you know, so stipulated as Mr. Gillard had suggested. And then the next thing is I would also recommend that we attach a letter from ETAC of why we're doing this and a little history of what this is all about and a recap that goes with it, that goes along with this. So it's a complete understood package and just not numbers.
I would appreciate going that route. And then I also have some comments around item 2. I'm curious how we arrived at 20,000 door hangers. Are there 20,000 households in the city?
Yeah, it's not. Oh, thank you. I don't have the exact number of households, but yeah, we based it on single-family residential, and I rounded it to the 20,000, so it's close to that number.
So we have about 300,000 folks in the city, and I think that my understanding is that we have closer to 76,000 in terms of households with trees. I'll go back and check my numbers.
Units, 75,000 units. Is that what you're
Yes.
talking about?
So when you're saying it's 20,000 households that are single-family residences, does that take into account the single-family residences or the buildings that were historically single-family residences but are now multifamily that still have 2 or 3 trees in the parkway in front of them?
Well, it'd really be one door hanger per
Right.
property site. If that.
So that's what I'm asking. So it's not necessarily 20,000 SFRs, it's 20,000 sites.
There you go, 20, yes.
Okay.
Okay, I think what we can do is pass this motion, or I suggest that we pass this motion and then come back and see what they offer us and where we use our little red pen and tighten up the numbers a little bit.
I'd just like a point of order. We have a
Motion on the table.
I've asked the motion table. It hasn't been seconded yet, so it needs to be seconded before we can even vote on it.
I would like to amend the motion to be for the 1 point. What was it before? 1.225?
It's 1.225.
So to reduce that by the 65 and make the motion for that amount. Sorry, to reduce it by the 210 that we would be saving in city staff costs. So that instead of 1.225, we would have it be 1 point.
That's 2-0.
Right.
So yes,
Sure. I don't see how are the totals arrived at? I see 885,000.
okay, I did the 885, and then I pulled up here to the outreach, which is on the next page, which says 30,000, 5,000, and 30,000, which is a total of 65,000, my understanding. So it was the 885 and the 65. Then when we went to the 3-part median tree watering, is to retrofit the current system and cap all the sprinklers is a one-time charge of $275,000. So I did the 885, the 275, and the 65, which came to the 1225. And that is the motion that Carl put on the table to ask for the 1225 at this time. And any feedback from there will work from there, but to ask for the whole amount.
So we're not considering the options A and B in the 1225. So it's the median tree water.
My understanding, and we can ask for clarification, is that it's A and B or C. So it's a 360,000 annual cost that would happen every year, or we take a one-time cost of 275 that is one time, and that would be in the money that we're asking right now. And Gillard amended the motion, and so I guess what we call for a second to the amended motion.
Yeah, so my amendment would be to say that we amend the motion to be for a total of $1,015,000, because we would realize the savings of the city staff for this, right? The city staff could be used for other projects. And hopefully the city staff.
So what you're saying is the difference between the 1225 and the 1015 is 210,000.
Mm-hmm.
And where are you getting that 210,000 from? The annual city staff cost right there?
Yes, and from what was discussed earlier around the cost that it currently costs the city and city staff time to water the median trees. And that doesn't take into consideration the water. I don't know how much of the 95,000 is for water, electricity, but I assume the cost would be around the same.
I asked for the order because we need a second before we go into discussion.
Is that correct?
We need, so there was a motion, and then is a amended motion. So what I'd like is a repeated summary of the motion and who's made it.
Okay, Carl, you made the original motion.
I made the original motion that we asked for the 1.225 to cover all the replacement of trees and the watering and educational.
so stated. So now we want to hear the amended motion. Is that?
Lod needs to repeat his.
So the amended motion is to request $1,015,000 for all the items discussed, and with realizing a $210,000 city staff median tree watering saving.
And is there a second for the amended motion?
Yes, I'll second the amended motion. I believe that is the way to approach it. So yes, I second the amended motion.
So now we're open for discussion.
I would.
I don't see a savings.
Yeah, I don't see a savings either. I think we need to repair someone's got to pay for repairing the watering system so we can realize that savings. And so take it out now before we do the repair work. It's got to come from somewhere.
I think the amendment should be to just strike option A and B. Those are the confusing.
Yeah, that's what's
numbers are
confusing here.
Everything. And we need to have enough money to buy the tree watering sprinkler system.
That's what the 275 is. And actually the 210,000 is annual. So if we're talking about a 3-year cost savings, we're talking about a 630,000 cost savings.
We're not, if we put in the tree watering sprinkler system, we're not spending.
Right, but we currently spend $210,000 a year.
Correct, but isn't us spending the 275 puts us in a position to save the 210? If we don't spend the money, we don't save.
Correct. So in order to, so the reason I want to approach it that way is because if we come to the city council and say, let's spend $1.2 million on planting and maintaining 700 trees, and they look at that and they say, okay, well, a 15-year-old got shot and killed on Birch Street last month, it's a little harder to pass that when we're, but if we approach it as we currently, as a city, spend $210,000 a year for city tree median watering, and if we do a one-time cost of $275, we'll be saving the $210,000 for until it comes time to do any maintenance on this system that we install, which, obviously there's no context for that. But if we're talking about a 3-year package, which is what it sounds like we're doing, apart from the fact that we're including 6 years of trim cycles. So we're talking about a 3-year package. We should be approaching it as, what is the cost for the city to maintain and the parkway trees and the median trees for the next 3 years?
I guess that's, you're right. I mean, that's the missing component is we need $1,225,000 to implement this program, but what we don't see here is what we're already spending. So.
But is this not spending over and above what we're already spending?
But we're asking for an additional 1,225.
I was told the $210,000 is the current city spend, not the over and above for median trees.
See, and the way I read it was here that the 210 was the over and above. So can we have clarification from staff, please?
Okay, yes. The 210, we're currently watering the median trees manually with our city staff. That 210,000 memorializes and shows how much the staff cost is to water those trees currently. So we're already doing that. That would go away if we had the hard cost of the 275 with the sprinklers, turned on, and not having to then manually with our city staff water the median trees.
But as a point of order, that 210 really doesn't go away. You'll use those people to do something else,
Service
right?
calls.
Yeah,
Of course.
So the 210 doesn't go away.
But let's be real here. That 210, we're not voting on the budget of Public Works or on the budget of the department that handles the trees. We're voting on a package to to plant and maintain 700 additional trees and maintain the city median trees. So any cost savings would mean that Public Works could use that staff time to do anything else or to hire additional people or whatever it is. That staff time isn't saved by the city, but it is saved in terms of the cost of watering trees.
Well, you do have to pay for that to go in the first time, right? Someone has to pay the 275, right?
Correct.
Where's the 275 coming from, if we don't include it in this?
No, I am including it in the 275.
My understanding is that you're including it, but we're not directing them to do the sprinkler system, that they are already doing the 210. So I think it becomes in the wording that they come back with us on the budget of, if we start out that it's 1.225, and then we explain that there is a 210 savings in there. But we're not, with this motion, directing them to change and retrofit the sprinklers. This motion is not asking them to do that because that's number C.
So that's what I misunderstood. I heard earlier that we were doing a motion to do number C.
Correct, we are. So we're doing the 885. We're doing the one-time charge of number C. Nothing to do with A, nothing to do with B. That's the internal budget of Public Works as I'm understanding it. What we're asking for is Roman numeral 1, planting the trees at 885. We're asking for the outreach program, and we're asking for the city to go in there and retrofit. If you go in there and remove that 210, we've lost the opportunity to have that one-time retrofit. So how they manage their budget of the 210, we need to have some kind of discretionary explanation from Public Works on that savings portion.
I see. So maybe this is just something that needs to be added to the letter.
Absolutely agreed.
As I see it, you're asking for 1.225 in supplemental funding to Public Works.
Correct.
And what I'm saying is that as soon as we spend that 275, what you're saying then is that we are requesting for the City Council to supplement Public Works' budget by 1.225. But
really,
we would be saving that. But Public Works would no longer need to be spending that 210,000. And so, as soon as the work is completed, and they've had this supplemental funding, that cost saving is realized. And what I'm saying is that we actually don't need to be asking for a full 1.225 in supplemental, because
so
they don't
may I go
need
back
that
and
in
ask the city to explain this to us, since we're in golf terms, we're out in the rough.
I can try to summarize this. The items by the chairperson are understood. It's item A, planting of 700 trees. That's 885. Item B is item 2 is the outreach of 65,000. And then in item 3, you have A, B, or C. A and B are not in play if C is selected. And that's what I understood the committee is selecting. So items A and B are not in play. In terms of the staff costs, there is no savings of 210,000. Our staff is going to go doing what they normally do, as opposed to watering the trees. So they're going to catch up on service requests. We're not saving any money. They're going to catch up on service requests, specialty trends, things of that nature in the tree services program.
Because the 210 is not being spent now because they're not watering the trees.
No, it's being spent.
Okay.
And so let's play hypotheticals here. Let's say last year we installed this sprinkler system retrofit. Now we don't have city staff watering median trees at all. What are the city staff doing with that time that would have been spent doing median watering trees?
Pedro, may I interject? Just thank you, commissioners. All I'm looking here is we're adding a lot of trees. We're adding a sprinkler system. That means they require more water. They require repair of a sprinkler systems because they also need maintenance. So we're not saving the $210,000. We're adding more work, really. The saving we're having here, we have a consultant or the contractor that water the system. I guess that would be lowered. Then we have an added cost of maintaining the current system that is in place. We're going to make it, we're going to have to maintain it. If you reduce this number, we're going to do what we can do with the money that is allocated, basically. If we run out of money, the scope would be reduced. That's what's going to happen. So my recommendation is leave it the way it is. They're not going to make a yay or nay based on $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 saving over the years. If there's a saving, that would be applied toward the program, or we go back and we somehow reallocate the funds. I think it would be premature to take the entire money out because now we're going to be saving $210,000. I know for a fact we won't be.
So I'm just going to put it out there then. Why even retrofit the sprinklers?
That question to staff, please.
When we retrofit the sprinklers, then we will no longer be manually city staff watering the medians.
But we have the city staff and the times allocated to doing that. And if we ever get out of the watering restrictions, then we'll be able to turn the sprinklers back on.
I can elaborate on that. By watering the medians by hand, we actually deferred our normal services and maintenance services. So we're talking about general maintenance services throughout the city. Service calls, those are delayed. We tried to pick up on those, but these staff is reallocated to the medians. There's also tree removals, tree plantings that are deferred, general tree trimming services, as well as other general maintenance services duties. So all those are being deferred because staff is not doing what they normally do and are performing watering in the median. So it's a cause and effect thing. We never water the medians by hand. In terms of the question of when we're going to water medians again, our code does not allow it, and the state code is probably never going to go back. So grass is never going to be watered with potable water. So all these cities that we've talked to are facing the same challenges that we are. It's a new service, and it's a new dedication of service of efforts.
So are any of the deferred items that you talked about currently handled by WCA, by West Coast Arborists?
Correct. The trimming services as a whole are performed by our service contractor, but all these other services that I mentioned are performed in-house.
So they've they've actually been deferred. None of them have actually gone to contractors.
These are, in terms of the services being presented today or proposed?
No, the services you described.
No, those are all in-house services by nature.
Got it. Okay. So I have a lot more context now than I did about 15 minutes ago, and I think it's really important then when this is brought back to us before it goes to City Council, that the staff report that's included with that item get included as well, and that this context is included in that. Just because, I think while we're not saving the staff time from the city budget, it sounds like the City Council can hang their hat on the fact that now, resident requests for other services will be completed, whereas before they weren't. And
I'd like to make the comment that in our pre-meeting with William, we did ask for that to be included in that letter ahead of time or in that report ahead of time, and that was covered in our pre-meeting. So I call for the vote of the amended motion. Is that correct?
I'm going to just withdraw that motion.
So we're back to Carl's original motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, I vote for yes. Call for the vote. I vote for yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes. Yahoo! Okay, let's go back to the agenda for today. Operational plan to monitor trees has been, so I make the request that that goes on the agenda next month, the report, and for the operational plan to monitor trees to come back to us for next meeting. Is that acceptable? Yes, staff? Okay, that's acceptable, and it will be agendized for our November meeting. We're number F, presentation of
Do we need to actually table the item until the next meeting? Because it's on the agenda.
Yeah, let me check. There should be a motion. There should be a motion to continue that item.
There's a formal motion to continue that item. May I ask for? Yes.
I motion to continue that item until the November meeting.
I second that.
May I call for the vote, please? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, now we're number F, presentation of safe mobility in Santa Ana. That's being presented by Mr. Wilkinson. Corey?
Hi, my name is Corey Wilkerson. I'm the Active Transportation Coordinator with the Public Works Traffic Engineering.
So, Corey, before you start, I have an introduction here. Basically, Madam Chairperson and Commissioners, this is one of the main critical programs that we have set up about a year and a half ago. It took the department that long to come up with a master plan to reduce the number of collisions, fatality and injuries involving pedestrian and bicyclists. Unfortunately, we have a high ranking in terms of these kind of situations here in the city, and mainly because we are a very dense city. We have a same problems and issues as big cities like New York, San Francisco. And we're dealing with those issues, but we need to dedicate enough funding to be able to implement the program. The number of fatalities and injuries we have involving pedestrian and bicyclists are somehow equivalent to the number of homicides that we have within the city. And so it's as far as we're looking at it, is of an equivalent importance for the city to strike a balance between the two. This whole thing is started after the tragic accident involving 3 girls on Halloween that was struck by a driver, were killed. And we had to really think hard about moving toward this direction. We're happy we're there right now. This master plan is scheduled to go to council in mid-November. We have, it's going to be costly for the city, but we have a plan to jumpstart the program, which is involved with a pavement program that I gave a presentation to last time. There's an overlap work between the two that if that one gets approved, this one would get a jump start. And we feel like by having a master plan and the way we are ranked in this area, we'll be able to bring a substantial amount of money over and above what we're getting from different granting sources in the state and federal government. With that being said, Corey would cover the basics of what we have here. We have given presentation to different neighborhood committees, and the purpose of these presentations are to get feedbacks from community and some of the electeds, in this case the ETAC, and we'll then take this to planning also. and get their input, incorporate it into our program before we take it to council, and then we'll go from there. And with that, Corey, go ahead.
Corey, we have 13-page handout right here that we're following you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Fred. So just to kind of give you guys an idea of where we're at right now, the Public Works Agency is constantly and very aggressively pursuing grant funds for safety improvement projects. In the last 2 years, we've managed to accumulate about $30 million worth of grants that are specifically dedicated towards safety improvement projects, primarily focusing on bicycle and pedestrian improvements to try and address some of these issues ongoing. So while we're working on this plan and we're trying to identify patterns and priorities, we're still continuing to work towards addressing these issues ongoing. So just to kind of give you an understanding, the city of the state of California ranks local jurisdictions. They cluster them by population size. The city of Santa Ana, at its current population, falls within the top tier of cities in the state, along with 14 other peer cities. Currently, the city of Santa Ana is ranked third, third being third worst, for overall traffic collisions. Speed-related collisions were ranked second worst. Bicycle-involved collisions were ranked first worst, and pedestrian-involved collisions were ranked fifth. As an organization, we see these as a challenge and an opportunity, something that we really need to focus on. Obviously, as Fred mentioned, the collision with the girls on Halloween a few years ago only further heightened our awareness of that, and we're trying to address this more holistically and to develop a plan on how we can reduce the number of these collisions and adjust some of our priorities so that we're balancing our priorities for our community. Pedestrians are 20 times more likely to sustain serious or fatal injuries in a collision compared to the driver of a motor vehicle. Pedestrian and bicycle trends have continued to remain stagnant over the last 10 years, which is the data set that we analyzed. We see roughly about 325 reported collisions per year, and that's a total of 34 severe or fatal injuries per year. Pedestrian.
Excuse me, Corey, you said that was stagnant for how many years?
It's been roughly about 10 years, except for bicycle collisions are actually on an upward trend. So we see this as a social issue. A lot of our census tracts where we see high concentrations of youth, poverty, Hispanic Latino populations, low education, kind of in the center of Santa Ana is where we're seeing the highest number of pedestrian and bicycle involved collisions. So this makes sense. A lot of the folks that are dependent on walking and bicycling in transit to get to and from where they need to go, we're seeing the highest number of collisions in those areas. 55% of Santa Ana residents, according to the U.S. Census, do not have access to personal vehicles, as compared to 37% Orange County wide. So, as Fred mentioned, we've been working on this for the last 2 years, starting with going to council in January of 2015, and where we're at currently, where we're planning on taking this plan to City Council in November. 46% of the collisions, what we see is 46% of the collisions fall on a very tight network of primarily arterial streets. These 30 locations that are highlighted here represent the areas in the city where if we invest our time and our energy, we can address almost half of the collisions that we see citywide. These are First Street, Main Street, Bristol, 17th, and Harbor. So really 6 primary corridors, and Edinger, are where we're seeing the most collision activity. So the plan kind of focuses on these high density areas where we're seeing the most collisions, and prioritizes those corridors so that we can invest our time and our energy in where we're going to see the highest impact. Signalized intersections, we're seeing 35% of collisions are happening at signalized intersections. So just the simple fact of having a signalized intersection does not address safety. 60% of all pedestrian collisions and 68% of all bicycle collisions are happening on arterial streets, whereas arterial streets only represent about 21% of our total city network. And 46%, as I mentioned, are happening on really those 6 corridors. So what makes the collisions more severe? We've discovered roadways with more lanes, wider streets, roadways with higher speeds. That correlates with the width of the street. Pedestrians crossing in between intersections, and obviously collisions involving impaired users. One of our top collision types for pedestrians is pedestrians crossing mid-block in between intersections. This typically happens when there's a long stretch between one signalized intersection and another signalized intersection. So providing more crossing locations can help to address this, as well as vehicles failing to yield to pedestrians that are actually crossing in a crosswalk. Bicyclists, the number one type of collision that we're seeing is what's called a right hook. A pedestrian or a bicyclist is crossing the roadway, oftentimes in the crosswalk as they come from the sidewalk and enter into the roadway, and motorists are turning right. Motorists are not typically expecting to see a bicyclist coming off of the sidewalk, but the reason that bicyclists ride on the sidewalk is because they do not feel safe riding in the street. The same issue, bicyclists often riding on the sidewalk. Motorists are not expecting to see a bicyclist on the sidewalk as they pull out of a driveway, and that's where collisions are happening. The same type of solution would apply in that providing a higher quality facility on the street makes bicyclists less likely to be riding on the sidewalk on these major arterials. So we took a comprehensive approach. We're looking at engineering, education, and enforcement. We worked with our police department and our school district to identify some of the things that we can be doing. So some of the engineering solutions, protected bike lanes. These are bike lanes that are on a street that have a physical separation between the bikes and the motor vehicles. This increases the comfort level for bicyclists and reduces the stress as they're riding along a corridor. Makes bicyclists more willing to ride on the street rather than on the sidewalk. A road buffet, these are commonly referred to throughout the industry as a road diet. We don't really see a lot of people liking the word diet, so we decided to kind of go with road buffet instead. It's because it's about providing options. So in some locations that involves narrowing the width of the lane. Other locations that involves reallocating, removing one of the lanes and reallocating that space towards other mode uses. For pedestrians, median refuge islands, we just put some of these in on 3rd Street. If you guys haven't seen them yet, go check them out. Reducing curb radius at intersections, slow speeds of cars as they're making turns. So are you guys familiar with this intersection? Does it look familiar to you? This is the intersection of 17th and Bristol. You can see Santa Ana College on the left, the shopping center on the right. This is a very typical arterial in Santa Ana, and this intersection happens to be one of the highest ranking intersections for collisions in the city. There's a lot of pedestrians crossing from the school to the shopping center and back and forth. This is what the vision is. This involves reallocating one of the curbside lane for a protected bike lane, reducing the crossing distances that it takes for pedestrians to get from the curb to the median and back to the curb again. So if a pedestrian is moving at a slower speed and they're not able to cross it at a single time, they at least have a place in the middle of the intersection where they can stop. On the same corridor, look in the opposite direction. This is just kind of shows a little bit more detail about it. So we call it a road buffet. It's about providing choices. Narrowing the width of the street helps the street to feel more less like a freeway and more like a community. And by doing that we also will see reductions in speeds, as motorists do not feel as comfortable driving quickly down a corridor where there's where the lanes are narrowed and there's more pedestrian activity happening.
Is that just an example, or is that a proposal?
That's a proposal.
Is there a 6-car garage going in right there at the corner?
The last I heard with the garage is that there was at one point there was a proposal for there to be a surface parking lot at that intersection. Currently, the college has not come forward with any plans for a garage at that location.
So that's a 3-lane street, right? Road.
That would be going from a 3-lane to a 2-lane street, at least in one direction.
Just for that little section there.
For
all the way.
a majority of the corridors that you're seeing in the plan, this is the type of improvement that we would be recommending. It's about reallocating our space, stepping away from our primary focus being about the convenient and frequent movement of motor vehicles passing through the city, and investing on safety of our residents in the city.
So is it just reduced to 2-lane at that intersection, or
along the entire corridor?
So that goes all the way down to the highway,
to the 5 freeway?
the 5 freeway?
Further down, the city limits?
We haven't got to that level of detail yet, but this is just a conceptual.
Well, you've got the one Broadway going there.
If you
and
see the,
we talked about opening up all those lanes for one
If you
Broadway.
see the map there, you can see that there's segments that have been highlighted along 17th, and the recommendations do involve a majority of 17th. So
Sometimes when these plans were put in place, the issue of collision fatality were not in the picture. So whether there's a plan for future, I think they have to take this into consideration and make the balance between this kind of situation and expanding the city and having cars going as fast as possible from one end to another to get from one jurisdiction to another.
So
all of these things would be come into play, and all the planners and people who are involved needs to take these into consideration.
So what we're talking about is that there may be a little bit an increase in congestion, a few extra minutes added to the travel time along a particular corridor. But when we see 34 residents in Santa Ana that are either severely or fatally injured involved in collisions in the city, that's where our priority, what we're trying to address. We've spent a lot of time focusing on congestion in the city. Congestion has remained a constant, but we've also seen, as a side effect of that, we've seen a lot of fatalities and a lot of injuries. So we're trying to refocus how we're looking at our corridors and say, how can we make these safer and have a more balanced transportation network? Because we're not going to be able to completely alleviate congestion. We can keep widening and widening and widening, and congestion will always appear. But we can address safety of our residents, and so that's what we're trying to look at with this plan. There's education strategies, obviously, that go with that. Our education strategies would be focused specifically on the types of collisions that we're seeing. So those slides that I showed you earlier about, being aware of who's in the crosswalk, making things more personal so people realize that these are your friends, your neighbors, your parents. Focusing our efforts on education campaigns that are going to have the highest impact with the lowest cost. Things like transit shelter advertisements have a relatively low cost and a high impact. So those would be the types of improvements or the types of education campaigns that we would focus on. Whereas a bus wrap or a billboard are a high cost with a relatively low impact. Enforcement strategies. So a lot of time is spent with our traffic enforcement officers, where they're actually out, spend a majority of their time at collisions that have already happened, working on collision reports. So that takes away time from actually doing proactive enforcement. So more police time focused on enforcement can help to address some of these collision patterns that we're seeing, obviously. So what we're recommending is that there's more enforcement that's able to happen rather than less reporting. That results in fewer collisions and therefore the less need for more reporting, and it becomes this kind of cycle where by investing more time and energy into enforcement and less time and energy into collision reporting, we can have a long-term effect by being more proactive rather than reactive. So what that means is over the next 13 years, adding additional full-time employees to our police force, focusing on adding civilian collision reporters, civilians who are not sworn officers that can go out and can handle the collision reporting so that the sworn officers are able to go out and handle enforcement, as well as the sworn officers can take the data that we've been analyzing and say, okay, where do we see the highest need along these corridors where we're seeing high levels of collisions? We can have saturations of enforcement in those areas to try and address some of the behaviors like speeding, impaired driving, crosswalk stings, and so forth. So overall, the infrastructure cost of the physical improvements is estimated at $42 million. That would allow us to address 46% of the collisions that we see. So we'd be able to take those severe and fatal collisions and reduce them by 46%. The additional 54%, we would be able to reduce the severity of those collisions. So maybe some of the severe places where we're seeing a lot of severes, we might still see some collisions, but they're going to be less severe because the speeds will be slower. And we're less likely to see such a dramatic problem. We broke it out into phases. The first 2 years we would be focusing on low cost improvements that can be done quickly. As Fred mentioned, we would coordinate this with the resurfacing plan. We can go out and do a lot of work with just some striping and some paint. Some of the later years, we would be investing in some of the larger infrastructure improvements, which takes more time to lead up. Again, some of the funding as part of that resurfacing program would be able to be kind of overlapped with this program to allow us to implement this program as part of this other plan. And then in the later years, we'd be looking at some of the larger projects. Again, these would be the types of projects that we'd be going after grant funds. As I said before at the beginning, we've been very successful in pursuing grant funds to address these types of problems, these types of issues, and our belief is that if at that rate we would be able to fund these types of large improvements on an ongoing basis, based on our successes up to this point. So there's kind of a breakdown of our total costs. How much we think would be overlapping with the Smart Santa Ana, the pavement program. How much we estimate we would be able to secure in grant funds to cover some of these improvements, as well as some of our liability fund reductions that we could see. If there's less collisions that are happening in the city becomes less liable in litigation for addressing some of these issues. So the next steps, as we stated, would be taking it to council for their approval. As part of that council adoption, we would then take the plan and incorporate it into the city's circulation element update. Our planning department has been kind enough to kind of pause on the ongoing circulation element update, the general plan update, while we work on this study so that they can take the recommendations and incorporate it into the work that they're currently doing. That would include reclassifying some of our corridors so that the city can continue to receive funding through Measure M. We would want to have a little bit more flexibility with our roadway classifications. So we've already begun speaking with OCTA about some of these corridors, talking with them about some of the potential mitigations that we can implement as part of these plans to reduce impacts to transit operations, for example. Ultimately, this plan is not an active transportation plan. It's really just a safety plan. And so the city has received grant funding to continue to work on an active transportation plan. All of the projects that have been identified as part of this plan would be incorporated into that. And then obviously funding and implementation. Our intention is not to have this plan sit on a shelf, but for us to actually move on it. I added something to this last slide. That's the website where you can find a copy of the Safe Mobility Santa Ana plan. It's not on the handout that you have. I just added that this morning. But you can download a copy of the plan from that website, as well as all the appendices. And I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
So first I want to say, I want to stand up and just clap and say thank you, because none of this has been focused on until you got here. And so I want to thank the public works staff, but you in particular, Corey, not only for this, but just all of the grant funding that's been secured over the past couple of years. So yeah, just a big heartfelt thank you, because we need it. I have just some general questions around the OCTA stuff. Have they been receptive to us reclassifying? I know First Street is one of the corridors. I live a block away from First Street, and it's bad at 3 o'clock in the afternoon as you're driving across into the sun, and you're near missing mid-block crossing, people who are mid-block crossing all the time. So I'm just curious what OCTA has said so far.
OCTA has been they've been very receptive. Our reclassification request is the largest that they've ever received. Typically, other jurisdictions have kind of a block here or a block there. Little things. Because we're trying to take such a holistic approach, and we're looking at so many corridors as part of this plan, they were at first were kind of taken aback, but then as we begin looking at it, and they understand why we're looking at this and why we're attempting to do this. They know that safety is an important issue for them, for the city. They also are looking at regional connectivity, and so they're trying to balance things as well. They also have to operate transit vehicles along these corridors, and when they make a large investment like along 17th Street with the new Bravo bus that's running on the rapid transit bus that's operating on there, they don't want to see this investment that they've made where now they have to add additional vehicles on there because the buses are stuck in traffic. So we've been having conversations with them about how we can mitigate some of these issues, and really they're kind of checking to see how much we're willing to work with them, and obviously we're willing to work with them and partner with them throughout this entire process. And so they've been very receptive, and they're reviewing our list, and they'll let us know what type of additional information that they're going to need as we go forward, as part of our circulation element update and our reclassification. And the conversation really is just going to start getting started. But until the plan has been adopted by our council, we can't do the full push. But we've been starting the conversation with them, and they have been incredibly receptive.
So OCTA's. Just to give you a little bit of background, OCTA's philosophy for many years been concentrate on congestion relief all along. They are a regional transportation agency, and they have been working toward moving a large amount of vehicles from one side of the county to another. Santa Ana happened to be right in the middle, so they would like to, their philosophy was to move these cars as fast as possible during the peak hours. Well, our concentration has changed to safety. We understand their philosophy and their priority, but we have made it clear to them that safety is important here. We are paying the high price for that movement of vehicle as fast as possible. So they understand there should be a middle ground right now, and a philosophy needs to change and adapt to what is necessary here. And we've been in that conversation for a while. They have indicated to us that they are willing to look at this thing seriously. We will have to see what happens, but we're going to push for it.
Yeah, and
I'd like to just add one quick thing is there were 4 factors that were shown on primary causes to accidents, one of them being impaired drivers, one of them being speeds. And so just last council meeting, we took an ordinance to the city council where we are reducing the posted speed limit at 32 different intersections in the city. So I think that's a really important milestone, and we're going to be able to continue doing that. We do a speed survey every 5 to 7 years, and so that gives us the opportunity to look at all of the speed limits in the city and legally adjust them down wherever possible. So all the improvements, safety improvements that you're going to see moving forward, they're going to help us to reduce vehicle speeds, and then they're going to help us to then post those speeds down, and then they're going to help, it's kind of like a vicious cycle, then they're going to help the enforcement side being able to enforce those lowered speed limits. We can't go into a street and reduce the speed limit by posting it lower. That you can't legally enforce that. So it's a vicious cycle that will take place. So I think that this mobility plan and just the general direction on lowering speeds and addressing those 4 primary collision factors will help us one day get there.
Yeah.
So we're just to add that we are expanding the footprint of downtown through the planning process. We are making a recommendation to do that, and as a result, we're working on having a blanket speed limit of 25 miles per hour in downtown and a business district. So that's also on the way. You need to, there's a situation. This is very similar to Vision Zero, which is a nationally recognized program, but we called it SAMHSA because Santa Ana is different than a lot of other places. In a lot of cities, they do have to have this bike infrastructure in place because they want to encourage people from abandoning their car and using their bicycles and walk to work and use the transit. In Santa Ana, it's kind of different. We already have the bikers because of our demographics and because of the socioeconomic conditions we have here. We have the bikers and we have the walkers. 55% of the people don't have cars here. They have to walk to work. They have to take their bike. So they're there. And unless we take drastic action, these situations would continue to happen, the fatalities and injuries. So that's why we have to kind of take all these actions, and regardless of the future plans and things that need to take place in terms of development of the city.
Yeah, I have this idea in my mind that had this been passed and the city council, let's say in the future, has another $11 million surplus, that there might have been some of this money budgeted for a plan like this instead of fully to other departments. And so, again, like a pedestrian died yesterday on First Street, in a hit and run, and again, this is just so important. So I want to thank all of you guys. And I do have another question around. There were some questions around sort of the recommendation for the road buffet. I'm going to have to get used to not saying diet anymore. So there are some recommendations around, or some questions around the recommendations. I'm curious, Corey, is there a book, a guide, plan of sort of recommendations that we look at when we take on these projects, or even the grants that we got for Civic Center and Santa Ana Boulevard?
So the plan itself, this is obviously just a summary, but if you go to the website and you pull up the plan, every single one of those 30 segments, there's a recommendation of what type of improvements will be, should go there. And in the document, I think it's in one of the appendices, there's a toolkit that identifies what all of these different types of improvements are, and what the costs associated with them are. It's a very complete document. If you go and you pull it up, it has recommendations of what's going there, how much it's going to cost. Essentially, it gives us all the tools that we need to pursue grants, and to continue to fund these types of improvements by any means necessary. There's a lot of tools that are out there on the national level, international level for these types of improvements. The NACTO guidelines are kind of a new tool that we're now able to use, and our engineering staff is now able to use. The more recognition that we see nationally of these types of improvements, the more comfortable our engineers feel in signing off and putting their stamp on a design that perhaps is not something that has historically been out there. So it's becoming more and more nationally recognized, and it's giving our engineers more tools to be able to implement these types of improvements. So going forward, that gives us what we need. But if you look at the document itself, a lot of it is actually, it's all right there.
And then does, say this is passed, are you then going to be focusing grant efforts on this plan as opposed to some of the other planning processes that have happened, like the downtown complete streets and the central Santa Ana complete streets?
Obviously, there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah, these are being coordinated, all of these different programs. That's why we stopped the completed street in downtown, because it was moving forward independently. And then other things that we have, we stopped those until we finish this, and then we'll be able to coordinate with all of those programs. So they're being coordinated. Once this one passes, would give us an opportunity to apply for more grants and have a better chance of getting grants, because all these grants are competitive. Everybody's fighting for the same dollar, all the cities. So that will give us a better chance, because now we have a master plan that is approved, and hopefully we'll take it also to OCTF, get them approve it. But the thing is this: we have a pavement program that I think you saw the presentation. Our concentration would be on that program, because that program would pump in somewhere around $15 million into this program because of the overlap work. And that translates into, according to this, about 50% reduction, theoretically, in collisions and fatalities, without spending a dime from the general fund on the surplus. We have a strong belief, and we have a proof that we pay a lot of money for our city attorneys is here also. We pay a lot of money on liability and lawsuits because of this. And through this program, once we improve this, we're going to lower that cost. So we're recommending to use that saving on paying for liability, pain and suffering, all these things that takes place, lose-lose situation, and be proactive and pump it into this program. So that would generate additional source of funding to this program, and the third phase would be the grant should be able to cover it. So we hopefully don't have to rely on surpluses or things like that, because they're not really established. We don't know how much surplus we're going to get.
We're going to write more grant applications, a lot more. So from this plan, from all the plans that we're working on, they're all overlapping, and all of them are creating projects for us to be able to apply for. Some of the different grant programs are focused on different things. There's the Highway Safety Improvement Program. That's focused specifically on safety. So the SAMHSA document is going to be an amazing tool for us to be able to support our applications for that program. The Active Transportation program has a lot of requires a lot of outreach and community input. So those complete streets plans create projects that are specifically geared towards that. But really, we're going to just apply for a lot, and that's how we've been successful at this point. Is just we're putting out more grant applications in the city of Santa Ana than any of the other jurisdictions in the county, almost combined. So there's a reason why we're continuing to get so much of the chunk of the money, is because we're just simply putting out more applications and investing more staff time into preparing those applications. It's not just me; it's our whole traffic engineering staff. So.
Yeah, I used to work for a grant-making organization, a large foundation in the Bay Area, so I understand how long those grant applications take, and I'm just happy that we're putting staff time towards that. We got something like, $12 million last year in grants from ATP?
Just from ATP, it was the last cycle was a little over 14 million. After everything was said and done, the previous was about almost 5 million. Combined with all the HSIP and the other programs that are going on, it's about 30 million in the last 2 years. So we've been doing really well.
Does this open us up to more grant opportunities, or just make us more competitive in the grants we've been applying for?
We've been applying for everything that's available out there. So it's not necessarily going to make us, but it will make us more competitive, and staying ahead of the other jurisdictions is part of that game. And no one else in Orange County has a plan like this, and so we're definitely going to use it as a tool to say, look, we're putting the work in ahead of time and continue to have that competitive edge to stay ahead of the rest of the rest of the county.
Cool. And I promise this is my last question. There's a lot of work happening around streets that are not on this plan. You talked a lot about the fact that everything's going to be coordinated. I'm just curious how you're going to approach recommendations for streets like Warner, for instance, where I think the last document I saw was just a painted or buffered bike lane, but where it has multiple elementary schools along that path. And so I'm just kind of curious if you can describe how you're going to approach recommendations that are outside of this plan.
Just to kind of give you an idea of our organization and how things are working, this is a very important item to address for Fred. He's been talking with our entire organization about the importance of addressing safety. Our engineers that are working on projects like Warner and some of these other projects are already coming to us and coming to the traffic folks and saying, what do we need to be doing as part of this? So now the Warner project includes protected bike lanes. The next segment of Bristol includes protected bike lanes. So our entire organization is already getting on board for how to address safety throughout the city. All of our engineering staff are looking to plans like the Sampson document, and Fred is giving guidance on that to make sure that we're incorporating all of these improvements as part of all of these other projects that are ongoing. So it's been kind of an organization-wide. It's been great.
I'm going to make it simple. The areas, the data, we have the data now. We know where most of the accidents are happening and recurring. So our concentration would be on those based on the data. We're going to concentrate on areas that have been heavily involved with collisions. So we're going to address those, and then we'll move out and then start, addressing other areas. So basically, that's where we're planning to go. To answer your last question, the organizations that evaluate grants would like to give money to cities that have plans, not just arbitrary, let me take care of this. They have a plan, they have a master plan that is approved. They're moving toward the goal like Vision Zero or SAMHSA. The goal has been approved by elected and oversight agencies. So they give a lot of value to that. For that reason, I think having a master plan in place would give us a much better opportunity to get this. In the grant area, the Public Works Agency in the last 2 years, we added everything up. We brought in about over $80 million worth of grants for different projects, the transportation projects, and it's unprecedented. So we have a really good team of people that work on grants, and they're really committed and focused. So we've been seeing the result on that.
I have two questions. Is this happening in our residential neighborhoods? Because I think this past week there were quite a few neighbors in discussion that roundabouts are appearing and center little medians are appearing, and these little magical orange pop-up things are appearing. Is this part of the plan that is happening in these residential areas?
So looking at the map, which I can go back to it if you need me to, but you can even see it there. Where we're seeing the most collisions is happening along major arterials. So a lot of the SAMHSA plan is focused on major arterials. But that's not the only part of the story. Providing safe access for bicyclists and pedestrians is something that we're looking at citywide, which includes residential streets. On some corridors, it's maybe there's a parallel residential street that is more comfortable for folks to be able to ride their bike on. Like for instance, the Central Santa Ana Complete Streets Plan, one of the corridors we're looking at is Orange, which runs parallel with Main. Main is a very tight, all the commercial uses come right up to the sidewalk, and it's great. But it does not leave a lot of flexibility for us to be able to do a road buffet on a street like Main. Where we're seeing the most issues there is pedestrian crossings, and then we can do a bicycle facility on a parallel street like Orange. There are in the works. There are plans to, and I think it's out to bid right now, to put in some more roundabouts in some of our residential neighborhoods. Those help to reinforce the residential character of those neighborhoods. They're traffic calming. So, yes, it's good for bicyclists and pedestrians, but it's also good for the residents that are there because cars that are traveling on their street are going to be traveling at a slower rate of speed. Cars that are using their street or have historically used their street as a cut-through alternative to one of the more congested arterials, they're no longer going to be able to quickly cut through your neighborhood anymore because they're going to have to navigate around traffic circles, around median protected crossings like what you're seeing on 3rd. The improvements that you see on 3rd are the types of improvements that we're trying to implement in other locations of the city, and yes, in some of our residential neighborhoods, absolutely.
So this past, yes, go ahead.
So I guess there was a rumor going around.
Yes, yes.
That there would be roundabouts and things in certain neighborhood. It's just rumors, I guess. Some people.
But I'd like to say that we do have neighbors that said that a city traffic person and a police person knocked on their doors and showed them all the plans for the roundabouts. And it wasn't like a rumor; it was an email directed to, neighborhood leaders. Did that come from you, or was that a ruse of checking out their house to rob it?
If there's anything like that, I would know about it. My understanding was we spent some time on this one because we didn't know where it's coming from. My understanding was there was somebody asked a question about what does the roundabout look like. So the staff showed a picture of the roundabout, and then all of a sudden the rumor mill started that they're going to put this roundabout over there in front of my house, and so it's not true.
At least you know we're a very tight community. The next question is, let's move on. Yes.
I just have a question about that because it sounds like there's a lot of context around that discussion that isn't shared knowledge. Is there a concern about the roundabout going in because of aesthetics or because of much common?
No, I actually think it's a level of communication because Park Santiago had a little roundabout appear, and my understanding it did not go through the association in communication. It did not go for the neighbors up and down the street. And one day it just appeared. So it was the level of communication before this roundabout appeared. So that has led to this concern because when you have somebody come in as a traffic person identified to a neighbor and sit down and show them what a roundabout is, there was a question of communication level.
One area that we're aware of that we need to, we need to make sure that we're communicating with the neighborhood associations is a lot of the funding that we get is, for example, safe routes to school. So we might be working with a school and we might be working with making intersections near the school safer. And so in those instances, when we develop some kind of a traffic plan to improve safety, we will coordinate with the school and we will reach out with the neighborhood association and the surrounding community to ensure that, we achieve something that's accepted by most or all.
So when you say you communicate, do you go through Orrin Williams at the school or do you go through, how does that work?
Whichever neighborhood association takes care of that area. We primarily, obviously, start with the school. Usually, Safe Routes to School, it's a school safety program, so it's born out of that. But once we develop the ideas, we will reach out primarily to the neighborhood association, and we'll start from there. And we'll have as many meetings as necessary.
And the next thing is about being a safe community. We've had at that 17th area at Bristol, at Flower, a lot of accidents, and we know that. But in the follow-through of those, they're all from a lawyer out of Riverside that we've, neighbors have said that they reported the accident. The person has turned down help or anything else and exchanged information. All of a sudden, a lawyer from Riverside is chasing after them. So it's some kind of accident ring there that I like to say, heads up. And it could be another rumor mill.
No, you might be right. People look for opportunities to make money, but that's not the concentration of this report. Is in actual accidents and injuries, severe injuries. We get the information. This information mainly came from police department, I believe, Corey, and other areas where they have a report written in detail of actual incidences that happened that impacted lives. And that's where the concentration is, not just merely the number of lawsuits or anything like that.
Yeah, the basis of this plan is strictly data. It's not rumor mill focused. It's not lawsuit focused. It is focused directly on the collisions that are happening in the city that have been reported. When our officers go out and they file a collision report, we looked at 10 years worth of data for and looked at collision reports. They looked at the actual handwritten collision reports to get the details about what happened at these different as part of these different collisions, so they can provide recommendations that responded to those types of collisions that are happening at those areas. So
that's why it took about a year and a half, because there
was a lot of work.
Literally thousands of accident reports that they needed to be dissected one by one to be able to develop this story of what's happening in these streets based on that information.
Thank you very much. I think that closes our number F. Oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
I likewise heard the same rumors about the roundabouts. It was basically concerned with, like you said, communication, and the other issue was, if we're going to do a roundabout, let's do a roundabout, not a. They look pretty small and insignificant. The other item, I'd like us to engage the planning department in the look and feel of our signage. I guess Melanie left. Looks like, we've, especially in the historic districts, we have a well-defined sign program, and then some of these pedestrian signs and warning signs that show up just really aren't a consistent look and feel. It's more of a, I guess, Caltrans, to characterize it, Caltrans look and feel. So I'd like us to be sensitive to our historic districts. I noticed on the example you showed at Bristol and 17th, it looked like those were thought through, and the signs on that example look pretty nice, but other areas we're not seeing that. And the other question, Gilad touched on it, is how does this interface? I noticed we are doing work throughout the city. Is there a plan for Bristol? The Bristol widening was never completed, and if we're talking about taking up lanes, obviously there's some sort of plan to continue widening Bristol. Is that scheduled, or we're just in concept at this point?
No, widening Bristol is taking place. What's happening, in order for us to have the right lane, left turn pockets, bike lanes, we need to have that space to make it happen. We believe we'll be able to slow down the speed and move volume through Bristol by having this extra room. Maybe we concentrate on dedicated bus lane, and that move through and shared bus lane with the bike. So all of those combinations are available through widening the street, because we have the volume. They need to move through our city, through Bristol mainly. OCTA considers Bristol secondary highway, Orange County highway. So that program is moving forward. But we're going to be smart about it. How we're going to move traffic. It's just not going to be a bunch of lanes wide, go as fast as possible. That's an old mentality or old way of looking at things. So we're gonna be looking at different ideas that would facilitate the movement of volume at the same time make it safe.
Bristol's continuing to be a phased project. The segment between Civic and Washington, I believe, is the next phase that they're working on now. They're doing right-of-way clearance along that segment. Our engineering staff did a presentation with the community, with the neighborhood associations there last week. So that project is continuing to move forward, but we're changing the way that we're doing that type of project based on this information. We're also going back, and we've now secured grants to retrofit the previous segments of Bristol where we've done widening, and all we have is a striped bike lane out there now, and we're going to tighten up the travel lanes and put in the physical separation along those segments where we've already widened Bristol. It's nice that Bristol was as wide as it was, because it does give us that flexibility to where we can still have the same number of lanes, but just narrow the lanes a little bit and provide a physical separation that will increase safety for both pedestrians and bicyclists along that corridor.
Corey, I think this is a great project. I think this is my hat's off to you. You have a very nice presentation. Only question is, on the width of the lanes, is it not state law saying how wide they have to be? Are we in any violation or concerns here?
Generally, from an engineering standpoint, the minimum that you want to go down to is about 10 feet. In very slow speed areas, you can go a little bit narrower than that, but generally we can go down to 10 feet. A lot of our major arterials are built with 12-foot wide lanes. That's a freeway standard. We don't have freeways, we have streets. So we're narrowing our lanes down to 10 feet, using that 2 feet from each of those lanes and saying, okay, what can we do with that? So if you look at Harbor, for instance, we went out and they resurfaced Harbor, and we restriped Harbor. And some segments we ended up with enough room to where we could put in a nice buffered bike lane. In other areas, we only ended up with a little bit of room, so we have like a 4-foot shoulder there. But consistently, all of the lanes along Harbor are now 10 feet. And so we're able to monitor that and see the reductions in speed. And I believe those are some of the segments where we're going to be able to reduce the speed limit along that segment, because we've narrowed down the lanes and slowed down the traffic. It's still moving the same amount of traffic. It's moving them at a slower rate of speed, which is going to increase safety for our residents. So yeah.
Sorry, I promised there was no more questions. So this is more of a request, which is that you have repeated that this is about data, and I'd just like to request, and I know you know where I'm going with this, that we put out the collision data on this website you've linked here at the bottom. Obviously we can remove anything that isn't that's personally identifiable information, but I think it would be really helpful for folks in the community to actually see the data. There's been some questions around reporting of police data and having access to the actual data around crime statistics, and I think this kind of falls in line with some of that. So if you could, just a request to put the data up on the website.
We were waiting for the final data set from the data set that we gave to the organization that developed this plan for us. There was a lot of misalignment in how it geo-referenced and things like that. So they went through as they were working on the document, and they made adjustments and cleaned up the data so that we have a clean data set. They just finished kind of wrapping up and cleaning up that data set. So now that we have that, we'll make that data available.
Thank you for the time on this. We've been waiting, so we're finished with item F, and we're moving on to G, updated bylaws. And William, you're making that presentation?
Just want to make sure that we have time to do that today, or maybe it would be commission desire to table that for the next session, because that can be kind of a lengthy discussion. We were at 9:15.
I like to table it.
I think there's gonna be a lot of discussion.
I mean, we still have a few things to take care of.
So I would like to add that to the agenda of the November
I
meeting.
just want to make sure that we're okay. We're sitting here, and we have John R. from City Attorney's Office here as well. I mean, but it's going to be a lengthy item, I think.
I motion to continue the item to the first agenda item for the November meeting.
A second.
May I call for the vote?
Say aye.
Ayes?
Aye.
No nays? It passes. Okay, so revised developer tree planting. I think that's no discussion on that. What that was is we had asked for that a few months ago, and William explained that it had been done, but it just had not been brought back to ETAC to alert ETAC, correct?
Yes, and committee member Morrissey brought a question up to the updated standard about the depth. There was no depth included into the
Handout. Diagram.
into the or the excavated area for the tree well, and so we've put in the depth now, and so we just updated the standard just last month to include that. So that was just provided for your review.
Okay, so do we have any comments, public comments, non-agenda items? Do we have any? Yes. Hello, Melanie.
I have a quick announcement. We have at long last put together a bookmark to be given at neighborhood meetings and in public, but it's for our Santa Ana water smart landscaping. So I'll pass this out. And the house that's on the front is actually a home that has received a couple different awards for their drought-tolerant landscaping over in West Floral Park. And so if you go to that particular website, it's Santa Ana Water Smart, SA Water Smart, and it gives particularly residents some guidelines for what they can and can't do on their private property. Also has the Public Works' guidelines for the same sort of threshold that it should have 65% green material and 35% permeable. And it also has a link to two of the Save Your Tree flyers that y'all did. So we're trying to work together so that we get all the information out in our multiple resources, and we'll continue to work closely with the Bill and Public Works on making sure all the news is out.
Can we ask, as neighborhood associations, we have 650 of these?
Check the budget, certainly be great. It'd be great to get more.
Thank you.
So since it's going to invite a lot of people to the neighborhood, we might have to put in the roundabout in there anyways now.
With all drought-tolerant planting, please. Okay, so any other committee members who would like to make it? With that, I adjourn the meeting, and thank you very much.
Wait. Are you
I
asking?
can't do what?
Are you asking for committee member
I did
comments?
public comment, staff comments, committee.
We haven't done committee member comments.
Oh, right, thanks. This is my second meeting.
No, that was a good one to get us out of here.
So staff comments? Just one quick note. The next meeting would be November 8th. That's our regular second Tuesday of the month. That's also election day. So I just wanted to bring that up for your consideration.
Okay, what we'd like to do, we'd like to do election day meeting, nice early in the morning to start.
I'm not available on that day. I'm running precincts. Maybe a motion
Let me make a motion. Can we move the meeting date to November 1st, which is the Tuesday before? I'd like to make that motion.
And
Yeah, that would be good.
I second that motion.
okay, everybody in agreement to that motion? Aye?
Depending on where we find
Aye.
it available.
Depending if Lori finds a room available, and you will advise us. Do we have a second alternative if November 11th is not available? November 1st, excuse me.
The following Tuesday would be the 15th.
So we try for the 15th if the 1st is not available.
Thank you. I did.
I call for the vote.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Vote carries. Okay, comments of
Start with you.
Mr. Wood?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, couple of comments. At the last meeting, I requested an agenda item for this meeting, and it didn't make it, and so I'd like to re-request it, which is that it's actually related to the safe routes to school you spoke about earlier. There was a discussion around some issues around some of the. Sorry, let me get this here. So many papers. So yeah, there was a public comment about Windsor Park, and so I had requested that we discuss traffic calming measures in school zones, including Windsor Park and Henninger Park. Henninger Park has two schools that are next door to each other, Henninger Elementary and Santa Ana High School, and there are near misses every day. And so I would like to request that that be placed on the agenda for November. And then I would also like to request an item for SAMHSA on the November agenda. Hopefully we can do it on November 1st. That is not just a presentation, but a action to recommend City Council approval of SAMHSA, so that we as a committee are taking a vote and lending our support to SAMHSA. And other than that, I just want to thank the Public Works staff on all the work you've done on SAMHSA and just traffic calming in general.
Tom?
Thank you. I have a couple comments. I know I've mentioned before, I think ETAC should review the public works policy for our parkway tree watering. And I think that's really especially important in light of the fact that a lot of people turn their water off in the parkways and the negative impact that's having on our trees. The other thing I'd like us to do is, I think we may be doing that, I heard, is looking at the types of trees we're planting on each street. Make sure we're continuing a consistent look and feel to our streets. I think that's especially important now that, as we seeing what Melanie handed out, a lot of people are getting rid of their grass, so that used to be one of the things that kind of tied the look and feel of the neighborhoods together. And the landscapes that are going in are very nice, but it's more diverse, and I think the trees are the thing that's really becoming the thing. They do a lot of things for our neighborhoods, but one of the things they do is become kind of that unifying visual fabric, if you will, that it's really one of the attractive things of our neighborhood, that people come to the city to live because of our trees and the beautiful aspects they add to the neighborhoods. And thanks to staff for implementing that detail correction also. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I wanted to thank staff too for working so hard on that program you guys put up, and also the committees and Janelle and Carl for putting so much effort into it. That's all I have. Thank you.
No comment.
I'd like to go along. I think this program, I must admit, I was one to hear say, how can you improve the safety of the streets? Because it starts with education. I see a lot of dumb people out there. I'm sorry. But I see a lot of crazy things with people going mid-streets and things that way. But I'm really impressed with this presentation. There are some things we can do. In engineering, we have the old terms, the old Murphy laws. And one of them is that nothing is foolproof because fools are ingenious. And that's one of the Murphy laws. And I think this approach is going to indefinitely help Santa Ana become safer. So I want to thank you for that.
I have an item F here that says tree inventory data report by the council that was presented at last month's meeting. And I believe it was said that by request of each ETAC member that they would do the ward and the neighborhoods within the ETAC, within the neighborhoods within the wards. They would provide this information to you by request. So I wanted to see who has requested it or how we go about requesting these for our various wards, because it was noted here it was done by request.
I can add to that, or answer that real quick. The request can be made to me. I have all the information in our Arbor Access database. So if anybody, a neighborhood association wants to request it, if an ETAC member wants to request it, we can produce it. But I only put in the sample because 64 neighborhoods and the wards would be quite a bit of paper to present everything at once. So that's why we put in there that it's upon request. But it could come through me, the actual request.
Okay, and then the situation here is it did not cover open non-replaceable trees. So such as, I'm using for example on page 1 of 4, it said there's 72 trees removed, but it doesn't say how many openings, space openings.
Vacancies?
Vacancies,
Okay.
that's the word. Vacancies.
That's not on there? I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry, but
No,
I
it
can,
didn't.
I can, that's something that's in there, so if it's not, we can put that in the report. The
So then
vacancies in a
each
certain
ward
area.
or each neighborhood would know that they have
So many.
120 vacancies that could potentially be filled.
Correct. That can be put in there as well.
So can we ask now if any of our, or put that on the agenda next month, and each of our ETAC members will know what they would like and we can add it to next month's agenda. Okay?
To you guys.
I'll make that request to add to the agenda for next month.
What is this? So can you just repeat the request just so we understand?
So instead of each ETAC member calling you or asking you, they can bring that to the November 1st or 15th meeting of what neighborhoods they would like or what wards they would like to have that information for. Is that fair, guys? Okay. With that, I adjourn the meeting and thank you very much.